Today is Thursday, July 31st, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Antros. There's a massive military exercise underway in the Indo-Pacific. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can always email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me now to get through the news of the day, Trey Goins-Phillips from CBN. And on the focus story, Trey, Sean Feucht is reacting to Canadian officials and how they censored his worship event.
Yeah, one church was even fined $2,500 for hosting the event, and Sean has some strong words for it, calling it demonic stronghold there in Canada. So we'll break down that story here in a bit.
All right, details on that coming up in just a minute. On the main thing, one of the largest military exercises ever is now underway in the Indo-Pacific. 19 nations are participating in this, along with the U.S. and Australia. Will this deter China from invading Taiwan? CBN's Gary Lane has more on the main thing. All right, make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts. We've got a handful of great ones out there. Make sure you're checking them all out. You can find the links in the description of this podcast episode. We put them in there every day, so make sure you get on in there and follow those podcasts as well. All right, with that, we are going to head to the news in 90 seconds. And a massive 8.8 magnitude earthquake off Russia's far eastern coast triggered tsunami warnings earlier this week and evacuations in nations from Japan to Chile, and advisories across the U.S. West Coast and Hawaii. Nearly 2 million people fled coastal areas in Russia and Japan as the first tsunami wave struck. Over 100 aftershocks, some as strong as 6.9 magnitude, have rocked the region since the initial quake. Experts say the area could experience thousands more over the coming weeks. Chile, still haunted by past tsunami tragedies, began evacuating coastal towns and 5 low-lying prisons. Sirens echoed across cities, and they scrambled to higher ground. And Vacation Bible School is in full swing across the country. Tens of thousands of kids are expected to follow Christ this summer, as VBS is showing it's as popular as ever, with nearly 3 million kids attending nationwide and an estimated 70,000 making decisions to follow Christ so far. At churches like Kempsville Baptist in Virginia, kids are enjoying games, crafts, and music while learning that God sees them, loves them, and has purpose for their lives. You can find a VBS probably still going on at churches near you. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And there's a great, if you want to see the whole story, they're on cbnnews.com, a great report on VBS. Just one of those things that I think as Christians, maybe we take for granted a little bit, but it's such an opportunity because parents, there's a lot of parents, and you see this at CEF camps as well. Our church does one of those throughout the summer for a few weeks. And you get a great opportunity to have unbelievers come in because, frankly, many of them are just looking for childcare outside of their, they're still working maybe, and both parents might be working, and their kids aren't in school, so they need somewhere to go. And a lot of times you have a great opportunity to share the gospel with somebody who otherwise wouldn't be at church. And we see that all across the country with VBSs.
Stories like these are encouraging because it's easy to get bogged down by all the craziness and stuff going on. It's important to be informed about about all that stuff, but there's also a ton of great stuff going on. And also, one thing this story, Dan, reminds me of is so often, especially when it comes to the abortion debate, many on the left will say, all you Christians, all the conservatives, you're just complaining about something, but you're not providing any solutions, which that's not actually true when it comes to things like abortion. There's a lot of people and a lot of churches that provide resources to the community. And my point in bringing that into this is also a benefit to the community, right? I think churches are reaching out and are engaging in their communities. And this is just an awesome way we're seeing people being the hands and feet of Jesus in communities and sharing the gospel with kids. And so often, I just talked to somebody earlier today, it's kids who then lead their families to Christ.
Yeah.
Because of experiences like this. I talked to one guy who said one kid ended up leading his parents and his sibling to Christ because the gospel was shared with him. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, it really is. Make sure you check out that report on VBS, on CBNnews.com. You can find it there right now. And we're going to go over to the focus story now. As you mentioned at the top there, some craziness happening in Canada. What happened with Sean Feucht, and why was a church fined $2,500?
Yeah, so Sean has been, making his rounds around the country and also now, of course, internationally in countries like Canada since 2020, when all the COVID lockdowns and all these restrictions were put in place. He started his Let Us Worship movement, and that has just carried on. He's pushing back against restrictions. That initially that was the goal, but it has become so much more than that. And he had a series of concerts scheduled in Canada, and the first, or at least one of the first, was at a Spanish-speaking church in Montreal. He actually did end up hosting the event. He was met with a bunch of protesters. There were, I say a bunch, it was probably a small but loud group of protesters. One who even threw a smoke bomb, a pink smoke bomb, up on the stage, and he picked it up, took a picture with it, and then just tossed it to the side. So there was no harm, no foul there physically. But ultimately, the reason they were fined is after the concert, after the worship service ended, officials in Montreal found out about it, and they fined the church $2,500 for proceeding with an event, which, by the way, happened on the church's private property. After the city said it warned the church that it needed a concert-style permit in order to host Sean for an event, again, on their own property. And the leaders in Montreal said that the event with Sean Feucht, quote, ran counter to the values of inclusion, solidarity, and respect. Now, of course, all of that's ironic because they're excluding Sean Feucht because they just don't like his perspective, which happens to be conservative and Christian.
Right, 100%. Where have these events been canceled?
So there's been a handful of events across Canada that were scheduled to happen, and because of that initial reaction and the controversial nature of who Sean Feucht has become as somebody who's outspoken. He speaks out against abortion, against transgenderism and LGBTQ issues, and also, of course, has been pushing back against any sort of government encroachment on religious freedom. He kind of has become somebody who pings a few red flags, especially to the left and government officials. So 6 cities across Canada, they canceled or forced the churches to no longer host these worship events because, again, they said, similar to in Montreal, his views don't align with those of the city, don't align with the values that we hold, and it's just not safe to have him there because there could be protests that get out of hand.
So how is Sean responding to all of this?
So we actually just spoke with Sean Feucht yesterday. That interview is up on the CBN News YouTube channel, and he didn't hold any punches. He said essentially that it's demonic. A demonic stronghold is over Canada. He said these are people who say, talking about the leaders, not the citizens of Canada, but the political leaders who often are left-leaning. The political leaders of Canada say that they're for religious freedom, but their actions are much different than their words. And he said, really, we were not going to Canada in order to prove a point, but we ended up proving a point unintentionally. He said we proved that Canada is not the bastion of free speech that they claim to be. And again, said that there's a lot of spiritual warfare, dark spiritual warfare taking place in Canada. He said we're just a group of Americans. We had, again, no real skin in the game, but I'm glad that we were able to, he said, expose this, and hopefully it'll be something that starts a nationwide conversation. And he also posted this on his X account. He said, "Here's the hard truth. If I had shown up with purple hair and a dress claiming to be a woman, the government would not have said a word. But to publicly profess deeply held Christian beliefs is to be labeled an extremist and to have a free worship event classified as a public safety risk."
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way Canada has gone right now. It's been something else. I mean, California had its share of issues during COVID and the lockdowns. I mean, I remember us doing a report on one where they were banning essentially worship music because they were blowing into a wind instrument, and it was just utterly ridiculous, the things that they were trying to restrict. And Canada was just as bad. I mean, we had underground churches popping up in Canada where they were worshiping in secret locations so that the police wouldn't come over and shut them down. And here we are 5 years later after that, and they're still doing this. It's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy that these things are still happening. And what's even crazier is that they're still trying to pass off the safety argument. It's for your good. Like this is actually for you. We're doing this as a service to you as the citizens by limiting what you are able to take in as a consumer, right? And that really, the sad irony really is exactly as Sean said, and he also said in our conversation, he said, I can do anything progressive. In fact, we have pride events where all kinds of explicit displays are shown all throughout the cities in Canada, even in some cities here in the United States. But the moment a Christian comes in and speaks, that's indoctrination, or your words are violence, or whatever the argument is. So it's a sad dichotomy we're seeing unfold in Canada right now.
Yeah, it really is. And we definitely need to be praying for the people in Canada, the Christians in Canada, and here too, because again, we've crept towards that route, that authoritarian route of shutting everything down. And churches were, again, the first, it seemed, in line after COVID to make sure that we weren't going to church. They wanted to make sure that we could go to the Walmart, but we couldn't go to church as easily. And so we want to make sure we don't go down the same road that Canada's going down. So appreciate you bringing that one, putting it on our radar today on the podcast. And make sure you check out that interview with Sean Feucht on the CBN News YouTube channel. We'll put the link in this podcast description as well. All right, one of the largest military exercises is now underway in the Indo-Pacific. 19 nations, including India, are participating with the United States and Australia. The message to China: the Alliance of Nations can be engaged quickly in the event of war, but can all 19 nations be counted on to respond if China invades Taiwan? CBN's Gary Lane, host of the Global Lane here on the CBN News YouTube channel and on the CBN News channel, has more on today's main thing.
Operation Talisman Sabre is now underway down under. The goal of the 35,000 participants from 19 nations is to uphold a free and open Indo-Pacific. Some observers view the exercise as a response to the Chinese naval buildup and aggression in the South China Sea. Well, joining us to share some insights on the China military threat and allied preparedness to counter it is William Dunn, a retired Marine colonel, military analyst, and the president of Strategic Resilience Group. Colonel Dunn, tell us about Operation Talisman Sabre. Would an exercise on this scale occur if China weren't a threat in the Indo-Pacific region?
Well, hey, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate you bringing me on today. And yeah, Talisman Sabre is a great exercise. It's the largest one, 35,000, 19 nations, as you mentioned. And really what this does, and I want everyone to kind of sort of back down a little. So, we're not doing this to prepare just for war, right? We're doing this to prepare for deterrence, to prepare for peace, as well as to prepare for operating with our other teammates, our allies, in a multi-nation operation / exercise. We do these exercises routinely, not on this scale. And the reason why we do them is simply to bring all of these forces together so that we learn and we train and we operate just like we are if we go to war. It should be seen more as in my mind, right, I'm hopeful, as a precursor to peace, because when our adversaries see how easily we bring together all these nations, this many folks, and we operate in a extended exercise, they should see that we could quickly transmit that into combat if necessary.
Well, we see Norway, Netherlands, Thailand, Singapore, and India have joined the exercise this year, especially India's participation. What statement does that make?
That's an interesting statement. Ideally, it's telling the world is that India is ready to become a worldwide player to support a free world. And so I think it's a good statement for them. I don't know personally what their level of participation is. And what I will throw out, sometimes you'll have a nation that will put in, of the 35,000, maybe they'll put in 5,000 or 1,000. Sometimes they'll put in a very few number of people. That is not to be looked down upon. That is a great thing, because just sending liaison individuals to support us is a great building block for future teamwork and obviously future support.
Bill, how strong is this military alliance? To what extent could the U.S. and Australia count on these nations to join in militarily in the event of war with China over, say, Taiwan?
We know our friends in the UK will be there wherever we go. I'm confident of that. What every nation, in my mind, will look at is what is required for their vital interest. There are some that will definitely come with us. I wouldn't put a guarantee that everybody would come. I would like to think they would, but, you never know. We've done missions, if you will, where some of our great allies have not given us overflight. So we've had to fly around their countries because they don't want to be seen as supporting a mission, specifically in the Middle East, a mission of the U.S. against a Middle Eastern partner. So, ideally what this does, it strengthens our relationship when we're talking military to military personnel, very often at our level, at the, general officer level, at the colonel level, or at the staff NCO level, the team and the people we're working with would support each other to death, if you will. We could rely on them. But the country and the civilian leadership of their country is going to depend who's actually going to come to fight when the bullets start flying.
And half a world away in Istanbul, Iran is holding talks with the British, French, and Germans. They're still insisting they'll rebuild their nuclear facilities. How likely would you say it is that the U.S. and Israel may have to bomb them again? Are we looking at peace on the verge of breaking out in the Middle East, or is a regional war coming?
If Iran pursues a nuclear weapon, again, I fully expect additional strikes, period. And we as American citizens should demand that of our president and our military. We should demand that. Not for Israel's sake, if you will, right? We should demand that for the protection of our families, our children, and the future generations of America. All Americans should demand and agree that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon because they promised to destroy Israel and the United States. So if that happens and they decide to do it again, I fully expect additional strikes. We, from everything I've seen, prevented regime change or helped prevent regime change because Israel, I think, had a plan for that. And President Trump, at least open source, has said that he wanted that not to happen. I agree with that. Regime change in a place like Iran could cause a humanitarian disaster for 40 million people. It could be terrible. And we're not ready, and we should not be ready or want to go in and fix that. Stability in the region, temporary at best.
Okay, Colonel William Dunn, thank you for sharing your insights today. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and you have a wonderful day.
All right, Gary, appreciate that there. And make sure you're checking out the Global Lane. Also, you can get the Global Lane in podcast form as well. We'll add that to the link. A lot of links for you, a lot of homework for you guys to go follow these links and follow them all and be sure you're checking them out. Gary, always great information on his programs, the Global Lane podcast, and on the CBN News channel. All right, that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
Yeah, we're checking out 2 Timothy 1:7 today. It says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." And I think with the stories we were talking about today, that is a great reminder that we are to be self-controlled, but we also have a lot of power and shouldn't be fearful of sharing our faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in general life, like when you're afraid or anxious about things that are going on, I mean, just remember that is not from God, those feelings. That's from the enemy. You got to trust in God, and easier said than done sometimes, but that's why we read and remember scriptures like 2 Timothy 1:7. All right, that's where we are going to leave it on today's Friday Junior edition of the Quick Start Podcast. Make sure you're heading on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Our new Substack as well. Pray with us through the news, faithwire.substack.com. God bless. See you tomorrow.